You see, when it feels cold, you put a whole lot of papers on your...
What is the relationship between feeling and intellectuality?
Beautiful.
Can you discuss how the universal energy, which is everywhere and everything, can nevertheless manifest most strongly in an awakened heart?
Good, good, very good. My glasses, please. Glasses. Oh, yeah. I'll have to buy another pair of specs to find my previous pair. Why has unreality superimposed itself upon reality? The answer is very simple, because it is the nature of that reality, the manifestor, to be manifested. And the analogy I normally use is that of the flower giving off fragrance. The flower is not conscious of giving off its fragrance, and yet it does it so very well to give you joy. Another analogy would be an incense, a stick. By the way, did you know that an incense, a stick, is made out of cow dung? Yes, that is true. I've been to Benares and seen it all done. And then, of course, they put in the various kinds of perfumes, and they're all rolled by hand on a thin little stick. That's the incense, a stick. Now the incense stick burns itself out to give you the fragrance. But with the reality never burns itself out, but the manifestation of reality, or that which we call unreality, burns itself out to become reborn, as your second birth in your question. Now, why should it be reborn? Everything is reborn. And if you truly understand the meaning of resurrection, that is your meaning, where you are reborn into a different realm because your consciousness has reached a height beyond the three-dimensional cognitive mind that all has. It goes beyond the mind. And when you, the reality within yourself, transcends the unreality of the mind, then you could say, I have been reborn. That is the meaning of rebirth, because there is no death at all. There is only life. And life, whose nature is changing form all the time, who will assume different forms at various times for its own evolution and self-realization. So, you have been born many, many a time. Many, many a time. Not meaning a reincarnation, that you get born into another life. But in this very lifetime, you have been born many, many a time as your consciousness expands. And when you cognize or recognize greater and greater truths, and with every little realization, you are reborn, because the new realization supersedes the older one, and therefore you are a new person. And yet the reality within you remains the same, for that is the only thing, the real self, the real I, that never gets born and never dies. Only forms and structure are formed, reformed, and even deformed. So this superimposition comes about, and if you would study Hindu mythology, like Sujay has done, you will find that they say that even this superimposition is but an illusion, or as the Advaitic philosophy rather would say. Shankaracharya lived in the 12th century, and he reformulated ancient ideas of thousands of years ago into this Advaitic philosophy, which we term monism, the oneness of all things. So here we come to the point where there is no difference between manifestation and the manifester. The fragrance of the flower is none different from the flower. If you capture the fragrance in a test tube, you will find minute particles of which this flower is composed. So the flower gives of itself, and by this continual giving of itself, the particles of itself gradually, that is how the flower ceases to exist in our eyes. But the fragrance, because being so subtle, still continues. You might sprinkle perfume in this room, or light incense sticks, and you carry them out of this hall. Yet when you come in, the fragrance will still be there. So, even without the manifester, which is non-present by your own cognition, although there is no such thing as non-presence, but to your mind you would feel that he is not present. But the fragrance is forever present in all the lives and all life that we see, feel, touch, smell with our senses. So we feel these things with our senses and also within ourselves. Now feeling is the father of emotion. Without feeling, there can be no emotion. So, when feelings are well regulated, emotions can be directed. The emotions of love, hate, and the negative ones as well, jealousies and things. They all originate from the feelings you have within you. A lot of them are lying dormant, but that does not mean that it is non-existent. So feelings come first before emotions come. The reason being this, that emotions are an outward portrayal of the inner feeling itself. The feeling cannot be portrayed or shown. I might feel great love for you. But if I do not demonstrate it through my emotions and actions, because emotion itself is an action, then that feeling will not be known. And not only will it not be known by you, but I will not be giving full expression to that feeling I have. And because of that feeling, we become emotional in a good or a bad way. Now, the word emotion is usually associated with negativity, which is wrong. And, if you want to deride a person, the person does something, you would say he's emotional, over-emotional. No, that is not the case at all. You can be sitting in your chapel, in your synagogue, church, temple, and be filled with emotion for the object of your devotion. And tears will start streaming through your eyes. There's one sage, Ramakrishna, and I went to visit his shrine in Calcutta, India, and I was in the very room that he lived in, where he used to have his satsang. It was a small room, could accommodate 30, 40 people at a squeeze. But the vibrations were so strong there that, having been an experienced meditator for many years standing and having reached that illumined state at the age of 15, 16, I could feel all that. And I was just crying and crying and crying. And I came out of that state a few hours later. And I was told by others that were there that you were just crying and crying and crying. What was happening there? Because my feeling was so great for Ramakrishna and his teachings that I had to spontaneously express itself with tears, emotion. So the feeling was first. Then came the emotion. Why should feelings be first? Because you are guided by your subtle body, which contains all the feelings you have ever had, and you draw upon them. It gets triggered off by some little happening where it comes into play and contact with the conscious mind, and that is where emotions really begin. Emotions begin in the conscious mind, while feelings begin at a far deeper level, which is the heart. Be they good or bad, depending upon the condition of your heart. Now, there is a very close connection between emotion and feeling. one is connected to the other. So therefore I've said this before, that the mind is connected to the heart. And to which would you give greater dominance, the mind or the heart? The mind can become angry, which is also an emotion, without any rhyme or reason. And the mind has the ability to transmit in vibrational form its outpourings or expression, not only outwardly but inwardly, affecting and corrupting the feelings you have. If you are emotionally angry, your heart also becomes angry. If you are deep in the emotion of worship or of love, your heart also becomes very devotional and very loving. So there is this connection that leads the mind to the heart and the heart to the mind. So the deeper you can feel, the more control you have of feelings. Now by control, I do not mean suppressing feelings, which in turn will create impressions and inhibitions and the like. Control does not mean that if you want to have a cigarette and you fight in your mind that I am not going to smoke this cigarette, that is not control. Because the seed of the smoking habit is very deeply implanted in you. And if it is so deeply implanted that you cannot control it. It's like a weed growing in your lawn. You cannot control it. And the best you could do is uproot the weeds. By control, I mean developing an attitude which will rid the weeds in your lawn. That is the best form of control. You always hear people talking of exercising your willpower. That too is a fallacy. There's no such thing as willpower. Develop a strong will. Yes, you can do it. You will something and you fight for it and you can get it. But you are not going to destroy the essence or the basis or the motivation of that will. It will still remain in seed form to grow again, to come to the surface again. But if you use the insecticide of purification, that weed will not grow again. And there, the mind, the emotional self, becomes automatically controlled, spontaneously controlled by the deep understanding we develop by Gnana Yoga, the yoga of wisdom, of knowledge, that your attitude, which in turn is related to your emotions, will change, and that is how your feelings will change. And all of you have experienced this. Sometimes you might find a person who is a loner, just wants to be alone and does not want to mix with people. And later, if that person is put in an environment And he or she will freely mix with people so beautifully. There'll be a wonderful communication. Now that communication comes spontaneously. You cannot communicate by forcing yourself through willpower, because the other person will immediately feel that it is false. People feel that. For example, this you have experienced in this past 2 days, when we are together, the feelings are mostly of love. Because even through words or what is happening inside me is love, and you really feel that love. Sometimes there's a delayed reaction. Sometimes you feel the force almost immediately. And feeling the force, you tend to become emotional. You express yourself because your feelings have been stirred